podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Cardiff Central Podcast.
Hello and welcome to Cardiff Central, your one-stop shop for all things Cardiff rugby. So I'm joined as ever by Carwyn. How are you doing, Carwyn?
Yeah, not too bad, Harley. How are you doing, mate?
I'm doing well. I think we'll go into the reasons why I'm feeling so great as we come. But before we do that, I'd like to bring on introduce a special guest to the pod. So we've got Steve Coombs from CF10 and also co-author of Bleddyn.
Give me a producer credit as well.
Co-author, producer.
One of the team behind the Bleddyn.
Yeah. So how are you doing, Steve?
Tell you what, I'm in a much better mood than I would have been this time last week. Because I can't lie, after the Zebra game, I was pretty pissed off. But in the aftermath of the Stormers game, I'm a lot happier. Doing good.
Yeah, I think we go. So shall we just run? Shall we run straight into the Storm to the
Let's
Stormers
go
game?
for it.
Steve, as our guest, do you want to kick us off?
The Stormers game. Before the match, I'll be honest, I was dreading it slightly because we had rested a few players. And going by the first 14 minutes, standing on the terrace, I was thinking, is this going to be a game too far? Have they expanded a lot of emotional and physical energy in the past few matches? And are they now going to hit a bit of a wall? But that shows how little I know because they came firing back. And I think as the second half wore on, the crowd really, a feature of the last two matches actually has been the crowd has been absolutely buzzing at the Arms Park, really getting behind the team. And I was feeling like if we mess this one up again and we go down to another narrow loss or another draw, I might need therapy after this game. But luckily, yeah, they pulled through, and it's a little early to say, but this could be a real turning point in the season, I think. And it's well timed because there are some big games coming.
Yeah, definitely. I think we were saying on the pod last week that, we were after the run of losses, we weren't sure where the next win was coming from because we seem to be missing out on all the games in theory we should be winning. I think I don't know about you, Carwyn. I was quite happy because I think two of our biggest issues from the last few weeks seem to have been addressed. So first of all was leadership. There didn't seem to be anyone guiding the team through, and then we had, well, me especially, wasn't particularly happy with the way Sherratt was using his bench, and that when he did bring players on, they didn't seem to have an impact, or he was leading people on. I think this time round we swapped it round. I think Ellis Jenkins being a fantastic example.
Yeah, he was superb all game. You mentioned little things that he does, the turnover that eventually leads to the final try. That's him. But the key example, obviously, is that clip that's been doing the rounds. I think it's from Scrum 5 where they've got him on him mic'd up. Which, for anyone listening, that needs to be week in, week out, in my opinion, because it is such a lovely insight into how players interact with each other, whether it be organising defensive structures, whether it be celebrating tries. It's just brilliant to hear. But yeah, Mackenzie Martin's just come on, and he's turned to Mackenzie Martin. He said, right, you're +1 and then you scoot out, basically. And it's essentially teaching on the pitch, because Mackenzie Martin's probably done a handful of line-out calls so far this season. He's been in and out of the side. He's probably learning his trade still. Well, he's definitely learning his trade still. And that is the leadership. And that obviously leads to the Mason Grady try, which was, so brilliantly executed. It was some panache in that. It reminded me of Tony Woodcock World Cup final, to be honest. That sort of set piece plan working to a T.
It's really nice to see a line-out move actually work.
Yeah,
because you see teams try a little, line-up move every other game now, and 9 times out of 10 they do not work. it's a bit of a thrill just to see a team try a pre-planned line-out move and it comes off a treat.
Also, it's a simple one. It's not
Yeah.
that complicated. It's Ellis Jenkins takes the ball down and pops it basically to Mason Grady. But you've got runners going here, there, and everywhere, drawing the eye line. You've got the threat of the driving maul. It's just where it was situated and how it was executed, and brilliant. Yeah, I just really, really like that bit of leadership from Ellis Jenkins. And we spoke about leadership and the bench. Turnbull coming on. I thought he was brilliant off the bench as well, and another couple of players that stood up from the bench as well. Reece Carey and Litterick as well. They were both superb off the bench to had a real impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking of that lineup move though, I feel like it works purely because of the personnel we had. Because we had a flanker who's normally in that +1, so they're usually only either going to be at the tail of the line, they're going to be going into the maul or pulling out. We had Ellis Jenkins who, is almost a scrum half, an extra scrum half at times, of his passing off the base, and you have Max Llewellyn who looks, for all intents and purposes, like he should be in the second row. So having him in the line now, if you're not position player and you're focusing on what you're doing, you're probably thinking, oh yeah, that's just the second row.
I think you've gone back a year there, Harley.
Yeah,
You called Mason Grady Max Llewellyn.
Big re-signing there.
I'm having. I do at least one of these every pod. There's always one.
But, we all want him back, but I don't.
I really want him back, and he's just being wasted holding tattle bags at Gloucester. But yeah, I feel like I've really done Mason a disservice there because, my word, he was playing like he had a point to prove. Yeah. What a game, just barreling through. I swear at one point he was running in the field trying to find a Stormers player he hadn't run through yet, just to run through him.
There was a moment, I think, in the second half where he went through 3 people, and there was a very, very loud Stormers fan sort of just over my right shoulder who was very, very rowdy throughout the game, and why not? But after that run, I turned around and I could see the colour sort of draining from this guy's face, because in South African rugby, they kind of pride themselves on being able to physically outmuscle people. So to see the opposition basically brushing off defenders, having someone like that is a real psychological blow for you in your favour. I mean, even when it ends up going nowhere. I mean, I think at the end of that run, he tried a ridiculous offload, which didn't go to hand. But in a way, it doesn't matter because it's a psychological blow in your favour. It really throws the momentum back in your favour.
Yeah, and it seemed like he was carrying for days. But I reckon he could have just carried on for well past the 80.
Yeah.
So the person who was on the other wing for most of the game, unfortunate hand injury to Harry Millard, was Hamer Webb, and I think we've done a good bit of business there. I think he was enjoying himself. I think he looked really well, and I think it does help. It does show how having an actual winger on the wing helps the team. But he's still young. He's still a young lad, and I thought
that's another guy with a point to prove. You see, that's a guy who's been released by Bath after a really promising start to his career. He's gone away to New Zealand, played for Southland, which isn't even a particularly fashionable team in New Zealand NPC terms. And he's coming back, trying to re-establish himself in professional rugby, and he's given it his all. And I think we're really starting to see the benefit from having players in the squad who've got a bit of a chip on their shoulder and have a point to prove.
Yeah.
And you need a bit of that.
I think the whole 23 had a point to prove. That's we've talked about our frustrations last week. If anyone had listened to our pod last week, they'd have realised that we were frustrated, fans were frustrated. I'm sure the players were more frustrated than anyone, and that was a performance of a point to prove. And after it was a performance I didn't see coming after 16, 17 minutes. I must be honest. That at that stage I was working behind the scenes on that one, and I thought I was starting to think, I might be turning this one off soon if I can find another thing to do. But then you mentioned Haber Webb's try, which owes massive thanks to an assist by Tinas de Beer, who I must admit I screamed at not to kick the ball, but that was definitely the right option. The Grubber kick through for I still think Cam Winnett has basically gifted him the try because he basically runs past the ball. If anyone's seen it, win it. I'm pretty sure Cam Winnett could have dotted that down, but has gone. Go on then. You might as well. It was a typical winger, sort of like I am finishing this.
Yeah.
Like, make sure.
Tunnel vision, ball, try line. I want that. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is good. Well,
it's good. Yeah.
Yeah. We talked about that.
The best wingers have that.
Exactly. And I think of how many that famous Shane Williams try against Scotland. Why on earth is he running the 10 channel underneath the post? No one knows, but he's done it because he wants to get over the whitewash. Sorry, and I thought that was brilliant from Hamer, but as well, yeah, Tina Stabia, I've questioned him a few times, but after he had a shaky first 14 minutes, but after that, I thought he was superb, and that little grubber kick as well was brilliant.
The thing with that Hamer Webb try for me that I point out on Cardiff Rugby Life as well, because he shared the clip of it. It went, the first 4 players you see around the ball when it's in the goal area is Cam Winnett, Mason Grady, Hamer Webb, and Ellis Jenkins. That was 4 Cardiff players before you saw a Stormers player. Like the sheer effort to go and do that. When you there were a couple of players there who you basically could have switched off. You could have seen that your team was scoring. Do you know what? Right, we'll just get ready. Start getting them over there. No, we're all getting in there. We're all going to get there. We're going to get separated. And I think that was the point for me when I realised we were properly in this game. I mean, I know that score took 14-17 or something like that. So numerically we're in the game, but that was the one where I thought, actually, no, this is, despite having some issues at the scrum, which we were always going to have with the pack Stormers brought down, that was a bit to me. I went, oh, hang on, they've got. And the thing is, we converted our chances more. We seem to convert more chances than we let go, which has been something we haven't quite managed the last few seasons. It wasn't perfect. Granted, there were some cock-ups, but it was better than the last 5 weeks have been. If we've got an improvement, which I was happy with.
I think we've improved every week. And I mean, we mentioned Matt Sherratt earlier. I'm really impressed by Matt Sherratt so far for a couple of reasons, but mainly because he's improved. The team has improved every week under his watch. I mean, he was saying earlier in the season, yes, our attacking play isn't where we need it to be, but it's not going to be, because did you look at the preseason we had? Players are coming in late, Willis Halaholo and really low left and then came back. The Bears coming in late, etc., etc. But given time, we'll improve. And that looks like an excuse, except for the fact that he's right. They have got better every week, and now we are a much sharper attacking team. And I think if the last couple of performances have been put in against Benetton and Dragons and, dare I say it, Scarlets away, we probably would have come away with wins from those games, if not, the full 5 points.
Yeah.
I think it's...
Sorry, go on, Harley.
Yeah, I was going to say, I completely agree with you. If you look at the games we lost, obviously we did beat Dragons, even though that's probably quite rightly our worst performance.
It was closer than I would have liked.
Yeah, but I mean, it was, we won, and that was probably our worst performance. And then the other games, which were so close, and you're thinking, if this team who played on Friday night, played those games, I think we'd win. We'd be on 4 out of 6. We'd be on 4 or 5 out of 6.
I'm trying not to think how many points we could have, because it upsets me.
Something some people I've been talking to have said to me is those results probably by the end of the season will actually look quite good. I'm actually thinking we're going to be looking back towards the end of the season thinking, actually, no, we really should have got those points, because we'll look at how well we're playing and think.
Yeah.
I agree. We're definitely looking better.
The one for me that frustrates me is still the Benetton one, because that was the Benetton without all their Italian stars. Yes, okay, Cardiff were also without several internationals, don't get me wrong, but that was such an opportunity, and Benetton are flying. Benetton are playing really well, don't get me wrong, but I thought that was a key game at the start of the season and real opportunity, and I think, but let's not look at the negatives. Come on, let's talk about the positives. Let's talk about a tight end scoring from 80 yards. Come on, to win a game.
Let's talk about the most beautiful pressure kick of the whole URC that round, coming from Seb Davis. All right, you can say it was a bit lucky that Clayton managed to drop it twice, but I mean, the kick was exactly where it needed to be.
There was such a spin on that kick. If he did it deliberately, he's a genius. I mean, the spin on it was always going to make it bounce awkwardly. I don't know whether he practices that.
For Seb, he is he was, he started out his career as sort of more of a playmaking 12 and then got very big and they threw him in the row. Whereas I imagine if he was coming through now, they probably would have made him a 12, similar to what they've done with Max and Grady when they came through. They
Possibly,
went, I think about 6 years ago, they would be made into, no, you're big, you're going in the pack. I don't care if you can handle, you're going in the pack. Now it's a case of, you're really skillful. Right, well, yeah, be a massive back. Great. You can run through South Africans for fun. And I mean, I feel like Seth sort of did it on purpose, but also at the same time, it did seem very panicked. I mean, again, going back to Ellis's leadership in small moments, it was him who got that turnover against the head. Speaking of great turnovers, Alex Mann with a fantastic counter up again, and then Ellis Jenkins passed it off for Carrater. Bust up. It was not like all the parts seemed to start clicking. Whereas I think other weeks, we were dropping balls because people weren't quite where they needed to be.
Yeah.
And today I thought it was, Friday evening, it was so much better. It just sort of made me feel really good. I mean, I've just come off the wrap and just have this massive smile on my face, just listening to everything else everyone's saying. I'm like, I don't care. We've beaten the Stormers 2 years in a row.
As someone who has played with Seb, it's granted at school level, where he was a 13 for us. It was luck, but he's a very skillful player. Used to goal kick and all sorts. So he's got a good left peg, but I'm not buying that whatsoever. I'm prepared to say
benefit the doubt.
But I actually thought he played really well as well. But it's hard to pick players who didn't play well. I thought, you mentioned Carey there with his bust. It wasn't just that one. There was another one as well through midfield. Using him as a ball carrier through midfield. I'm starting to wonder whether someone might suggest picking him in the back row and giving him a shot, seeing how he turns out in the back row as a sort of Xavier Rush replacement. But I just, everything about the second half performance seemed assured. Not leading for most of the game, but also not out of control. There was never panic. There was never worry. Mackenzie Martin comes on. You get a scrum just under the sticks. He makes 10 yards to set up the final try. He's unfortunate not to score. It's all the components came together. The whole team seemed to be on the same wavelength. And you mentioned Sherratt improving the team as a whole, yes, but also individuals are still rapidly rising, and Alex Mann is improving head over heels. That small mistake he made against Scarlets a few weeks ago versus a really assured defensive display on the weekend. I'm really excited about where the Cardiff side could go. And as Steve mentioned earlier, with some big games to come over the Christmas period, and some big derbies, Scarlets are going to be reeling after one of them. So we'll see how that goes.
The other player that I think needs a mention after that game is Ellis Bevan, because he's another player who at the start of the season you'd probably say, okay, well, he's got potential. You can see, he's quite quick. He looks fairly assured for a relatively young player, but he's now becoming a proper player. I mean, that penalty kick save towards the end quite possibly saved the game for us. I thought his kicking got better as the game went on. He looks like a leader. He doesn't mind mixing it, and I don't think we've seen much of him in full flight yet, but he's a very, very quick player, like winger quick. So he's another one who you can see becoming more and more of a key player for Cardiff, not just this season, but the next few seasons.
I think on that, he needs someone to just give him that confidence to sometimes say, if it's on to show and go, just go for it. And someone needs to just get around him and say, because at the moment he's the way I would say is he's tidy without being electric. He's not added that, and I from what you're saying and having seen bits and bobs, he does have that ability, but he hasn't yet shown it as much. I think he's still in that learning phase of not wanting to do anything wrong, wanting to make the right decisions. Whereas sometimes as a 9, you need to
find that extra bit of spark.
Yeah.
I do think as well, because it obviously, this is Jockey's first season in charge. We've got the attack going through that. Maybe they're saying, we know you can do that. We'll bring it in later. But let's get the system nailed, because we're not, we're, even in the Storms game, we're probably only about 75-80% nailed on that system, attacking system. And everyone's in exactly the right place where they need to be to break the line. That maybe, once everyone knows where they should be, and then you sort of add that as an extra layer on top. That might, at least that's the way very limited experience of club rugby. Is the coaches sort of nail on, you get the system sorted, then we'll worry about chucking offloads in or doing weird darts and kicks. But as long as you've got the basic structure, and then it's a lot easier to adapt, or when that doesn't work, you can revert back. I don't know if anyone else wants to say any more about that game. I mean, I could talk about it for hours, because I just absolutely I just thought it was a great performance. Speaking of not leading at all, we didn't lead until that final try.
That's true.
We were always behind or drawing. So again, it's a lot of what we said at the start of the season. We want to keep in the fight so that we can win. So yeah, very, very impressed with that. One
thing I wanted to ask Steve, because he mentioned the what was it like in the stands, because I wasn't able to be there. I don't know if you, Harley, were able to be there due to the distance on a Friday night, but Steve, what was that experience like in the stands? Because it seemed to be bouncing down at the Cap.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was in Southeast Terrace, which is where my season ticket is, and I think that's the second match in a row where it's sold out in that section. And when there's a kind of a virtuous circle effect where the crowd can see the players are fighting for the result, and then they respond, and then the team give that back, and it builds and builds and builds. So by the last 20 minutes, it was like a bear pit in there. I mean, I know Cardiff Arms Park has a reputation for being a lot more sedate. Last couple of games, it has not been sedate. It's been a fantastic atmosphere. And I'm really enjoying it. I think that's another game where I think everyone who went down will want to come back for the next game, because it was just fun.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone follows Simon Thomas, but he said straight after the game that apparently tickets are selling like wildfire for next week's game, and it seems to be the inspiration, isn't it?
Yeah, well, people like a win, and people like going to rugby matches where there's a nice buzz in the air, and that's what we got at Cardiff at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I like thinking about the like last time, unfortunately, I didn't make it. As I said, Friday night's games are a bit, at my current work situation, a bit too much of a hassle to get up to Cap in time. I will be there next weekend. Can't wait. I managed to get my ticket before the rush. But it sounded so good. It reminded me of the buzz around the Leinster game when we, Jared kicking that last minute penalty, and again it was just like everyone hyping up and backing the players, and in the Challenge Cup run, that was 2018 season. 2018.
Yeah, that's right.
In Bilbao, and again, like the crowd was building up, and then forget the season afterwards. Then, Cardiff had their best average attendance for a fair few years after the back of that, and people rolled up and chanted. And
I think again, it affects the opposition as well.
Yeah,
it affects the opposition as well, because there was a lot of chat after the game about the Stormers making a lot of errors. I think a certain portion of those errors were getting flustered because they felt the crowd on their backs, and you could see in their body language they were rattled in that second half. And I'm sure a lot of those spilled balls and dodgy passes were a product of that.
Yeah. Ready for a very clunky segue?
Oh, a segue. Exciting.
I was going to say we've been talking about fans. This is a fans podcast. What about the most is this the most famous fan of all, Steve? And now's your opportunity to show.
You see? So yeah,
So,
I mean, but she's quickly becoming possibly the most famous Cardiff fan of all time. This is
I'd just like to say, for the benefit of those who are only on an audio medium, and we'll if Steve lets us use the image, we'll flag it.
Of
We'll
course
flag
you
it
can
on
use
the
the image,
socials
yeah.
as well. So he's holding up one of his wonderful prints, which are available, I believe.
Yep.
If
So
it's you to buy.
for listeners, I'm holding up a wonderful print of 12-year-old Jean Williams, who back in the 1950s was a sort of unofficial Cardiff mascot. She was originally from Mountain Ash, I believe, and her father, I think, had played for Cardiff before the war, and she had made this wonderful homemade bit of merch, which was this Cardiff jersey with all the names of the Cardiff players kind of sewn into it. And when you watch the Pathé newsreel footage of the 1953 Cardiff All Blacks match, she really stands out. And when we've been trying to build up a bit of anticipation for our Bleddyn comic book online, and we've been showing various images from it, the one that really catches people's imagination is Jean Williams. And I think that's because generally when you're looking back to the 1950s, it's difficult to place yourself there. When you look at crowd shots of there, it's just generally like men in long overcoats, flat caps. But then you look at young Jean in her kind of homemade merch, and you just feel like, that's someone I could see at the game nowadays. She really kind of brings it to life. And so when we created our Bleddyn comic book, which is out now, she had to have a kind of a special role in there, and that's what we gave her.
Yeah. Well, why didn't you explain a bit more about the Bleddyn comic book? Because you've mentioned it a couple of times there, but for people that don't know,
So myself and James Stafford, who has written a series of illustrated rugby histories. I have one here for YouTube viewers. Get his new one, Rugby Rebels, Role Models and Giant Killers. It's an excellent book. We had a conversation 18 months ago now about rugby heritage and how in Wales we think we're quite good at respecting the game traditions and heritage, etc. But in reality, we're probably not. When you compare it with other sports, or you compare it with rugby league, American football, soccer, we're actually a bit crap at it in Wales. I mean, for example, there's still no rugby museum in Cardiff, which is crazy when you think about the number of people who come to Cardiff because it is synonymous with rugby. So we're not very good at the heritage thing. And we were thinking of ways, what's a way of presenting it? What's a way of sort of giving it some new impetus for people who are kind of new to it? And both James and myself in the past have worked in comic books. We know how to put a comic book together. So we had the idea, well, why don't we do one based around rugby, and we'll base it around one big event in Cardiff rugby history. And the obvious one with the 70th anniversary around the corner was the 1953 Cardiff All Blacks match, which Cardiff won 8 points to 3. So we scripted it up, and we found a fantastic artist named Gary Erskine, who has worked for some big names in comic book publishing. He's worked for Marvel, he's worked for DC. He's drawn Captain America, he's drawn Dan Dare. 30 years experience in the comic book industry. He, to my surprise, because I thought, well, may as well aim high, you can always say no. He agreed to do it. And we've created it, and we're really happy with it. It's a tribute, first and foremost, to Bleddyn Williams, who I guess is a name people know, but maybe don't know that much about. Known in his day as the Prince of Centres. Probably like all people from his generation in rugby, they suffer a little bit from having played before colour TV came around. All their big moments came, there's some footage on newsreels, there's black and white photos, but we don't have, like the great teams of the 70s, we don't have colour footage. But now we do have colour footage in the in the shape of a comic book that we've created. So we hope it brings that heritage and that history to life for people. And also, when you look at the background to it, Bleddyn Williams's background, the background of the players, what it meant to the city at that time, it's a really good story and a really good story to retell.
Yeah, because it was, that time we are talking about, people talk about golden eras of Welsh rugby. The 50s was that, but it was for the club sides as well, wasn't it? It's not just that famous win, obviously in '53 is something that's often talked about by the Wales side, but it's not often talked about the club sides and how strong it was then.
That's true. I mean, that era for Cardiff in particular, that is arguably the greatest Cardiff side. Bleddyn Williams, Cliff Morgan, Rex Willis, Sid Judd. I mean, that was a team that was feared and respected against everyone they played. They should have beaten South Africa as well. They beat Australia. They really beat all comers, and they were being watched. I mean, I think for decades, right up until the 80s and 90s, the world record for a club rugby match was 48,000 who watched Cardiff play Newport around that time. And, Cardiff Newport matches in that era would regularly get 30, 40,000. You're talking about the old Cardiff Arms Park being packed every week to watch these people play. And, that's still post-war Britain. And having a team like that really lit up the city. And it's an era which deserves to be remembered because it is a glorious chapter. But as you say, it came before colour TV, and because it comes before colour TV, it kind of fades away in the memory. There are only few people still around who would have watched that team play. And I think it's a little sad that it then just becomes something which is a team photo in the corner of a clubhouse, when it can be something that can be remembered. And as I started off saying, we are quite bad at remembering in Welsh rugby. We think we aren't, but we are.
But first and foremost, how would you be able to obtain this comic book or see this comic book or read this comic book? That's I sound desperate, but I am. That's partly the problem.
Well, if you would like to buy the comic book, which is priced at £5.50 including shipping, or you would like to purchase a print of various pounds from the comic book, you can go to bleddyn1953.co.uk, where it is on sale. Or you can go to 1823 Heritage, where they're listing it on there, and it's available as a bundle featuring have you seen their Skull and Crossbones t-shirts? You can get it as a bundle with one of those and a nice blue and black mug. But yeah, the main place to get it is bleddyn1953.co.uk. Perfect Christmas present for every Cardiff fan in your life, or yourself.
It's being bought. Either my partner's getting it for me or I'm getting it for myself. Something's happening.
Yeah, similar situation. I think my mum, who's the one who got me into rugby, and is more Cardiff mad than I am, and I think I said thankfully she didn't really listen to the podcast, so I said I'll probably slip that in there at some point as well. Maybe with the Skull and Crossbones t-shirt, because she always likes extra layers to wear
a few other bits,
down on the South Terrace.
She loved it.
I said the interesting thing for me, because obviously, I mean, I know James Stafford likes having illustration, a lot of illustrations in his history books anyway, but it is interesting that you've gone for comic format. I know you've explained a bit with your background in it, but it's just quite nice having, I end up with loads of rugby books on my shelf, and they all have sort of very they all look really formal. Or it's this player, this coach, whatever. The fact it's a comic is something different. I really like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, like I say, we were thinking about something different and different ways of telling these stories. And for Gary, who got involved to do the artwork, a big motivator for him was that he's worked in comic books for 30 or so years. And particularly in the UK, you say comic book, people tend to still think the Beano or possibly superheroes. But in reality, you can tell any kind of story you like in a comic book format. I mean, Antoine Dupont has just had his own comic book published in France, where they have a much bigger culture around comic book storytelling. There's a fantastic, again, a French book telling the history of women's rugby, which again it's published in comic book format. And I think what comic books give you is, yes, they're still images, they're 2D, but if you get a really good artist like Gary, you can create a sense of dynamism and movement on the page, and you can create something really exciting. I mean, ideally, we'd have made a film about Bleddyn Williams, but the budget wouldn't really stretch that far. And this is the next best thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been luckily due to things Steve asked me to do early a couple of months ago. I ended up managing to get a couple of sneak peeks of some of the images in the panels, and just the way they stand out and how vibrant. And as I said, I'm thinking about like those stuffy animals, and it'll be a team photo, or you might get someone in the corner. It just stands out. I love it.
Yeah, it's the complete antidote to the team photo in the dusty corner of the clubhouse. It's bringing that to life, because these were not stuffy, uninteresting people. These were fascinating people with incredible lives, and it shouldn't be that they should be in that dusty photo. It's nice to bring them to life.
Yeah, absolutely. So in case you missed it, so Bleddyn 1953.
Bleddyn1953.co.uk.
Or if you want the nice fancy T-shirt and a mug with it, then try 1823 Heritage.
Yeah,
which I might plug because they've got some fantastic stuff on there. Anyway.
They've got some great stuff there, and they deserve some support actually.
Yeah. So I said if you do want more classic rugby merch, I definitely recommend going to them.
I was just wondering, Steve, is this an isolated one, or are there plans for future sort of similar style?
This won't be isolated, no. We're going to do these in future. We think after this we'll have kind of proven what we can do, and we'll be able to do more. We're having a little debate on who the next subject will be.
No spoilers.
Me being me, I quite like to do Frank Hancock, who features on the cover of, again for listeners, I'm holding something up to the camera, who features on that. There's Frank Hancock on the cover of James's new book. I think he'd make a fantastic subject for any kind of storytelling. I mean, he's the man who's basically responsible for Cardiff being in the World Rugby Hall of Fame. He essentially helped create modern rugby for the passing game for three-quarters. There's also an idea that we might do someone a bit more modern, and not necessarily Cardiff, but I think James wouldn't want me to say who. But we're sort of putting that together, having our thinking caps on, and how to tell that fascinating person's story. But yeah, so no, it's not. This isn't an isolated incident. There's plenty more to come.
There's a watch this space /
yeah. There's a watch this space. I'm doing a hook and a bait. Yeah.
Yeah, you got me. I'm not denying it. I'm absolutely hooked. It does sound fascinating, and I really hope there is a lot more to come, because that
will be. Yeah.
For the benefit of YouTube viewers, that print, if you wouldn't mind holding it up again, that print is special, and to see more work like that.
It's a fantastic image, isn't it?
Yeah.
So and it captures the imagination so easily when, the more I see it, the more I just kind of fall in love with her, because I think her passion for the team all these years later really comes through. And I just think about what a fantastic day she must have had on 21st November 1953. She must have been on top of the world. And it's nice to kind of bring that to life, like I say.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from one clunky segue to another, we've got a few we've got a couple of listeners' questions in and thoughts after the
Okay.
game. So I thought I'm going to start off with you, Steve. This one's very much tongue in cheek from Dr. Paul McDonald. Someone we both know quite well. So he's wondering if you'd like to make a comment on the tumbleweed issue in the North Terrace.
Well, I mean that sort of links back to something I was saying earlier about the Arms Park having a reputation for being sedate, and I think part of that reputation is the camera gantry is in the South Stand or the Peter Thomas stand. Anyone that goes to the Arms Park regularly knows the first stand and the first set of terraces to fill up are always the Peter Thomas stand, but the camera is pointing at the north. Generally speaking, if the north is half full, the Peter Thomas stand will be 2/3 full, generally. If the north is 3/4 full, the south stand will absolutely have sold out. But because it's pointing in that direction, you can get the impression of a fairly empty ground. And I suppose until the ground is redeveloped, which touch wood will happen, you're always going to have that problem, because even if you sell out the North Terrace, there are always going to be spaces at the side, because that was built at a time when you were allowed to jam a hell of a lot more people in there than you are in the modern health and safety rules. So it's you can only fit in, maybe 2/3 of what was it can actually hold, and naturally they will congregate towards the middle. So
I think there's a
the
large bit
optics
for
are
the
a bit
S4C
crap.
as well.
Pardon?
Sorry, I think there's a large bit as well where S4C and BBC uses their TV bit on the
That's right.
north,
yeah. There's an
northwest
bit, yeah.
side. So it's this huge block that
So
always
yeah.
looks empty, and it's because it's a camera crew area.
So yeah, the tumbleweed issue, I know what he means. The optics aren't great, but like I say, to be at the Arms Park the last couple of weeks, there has not been tumbleweed. It has been noisy.
It's one thing I thought they did really well with Wales women at the Arms Park, where they intentionally only sold the North Terrace first, and then they sold the North Stand first, and then opened up to the South, because then because they were aware of the camera issues. I mean, I did have a friend who joked with me, the only reason that the cameras in the South Stand is because if it was in the North, they'd have nicked them.
Probably true, possibly true.
Yeah, going to. I said, I don't know if you want to. I said, have you got the questions up, Carwyn, or no? I can keep going through.
Yeah, no, crack on.
So I think we've got quite. So I'm not going to go with ones on the post, but ones that came up after the match quite a lot. So is Mason Grady. So I think we all agreed he had a fantastic game on the wing. So a lot of people asking, is wing his position now, or is he still a centre? Is he someone who can do both?
I mean, I suppose the answer is he can do both. If I'm really honest, I think I would lean towards the wing at the moment. The reason I say that is because when you get these situations where he's able to run the ball back at people from the wing, he looks bloody terrifying. The space he has, the defense isn't set as well as it is from a set piece if he's in the center. He's a real threat running the ball back from a kick. And also, I mean, I think during the Bulls game they targeted him a little bit with kicks, and not only did he catch them cleanly, but he was then on the rampage, and that's a real weapon to have. I suppose if he's on the wing, you've got to kind of allow for that and make sure you've planned for ways to get the ball in his hands, which we did with that line-out move. But yeah, he can absolutely do both. But at the moment, I'm leaning towards winger.
I think as well,
go on, Harley.
I was going to say, for me, basically, in terms of attack, not so much an attacking thing, but defensively, I think the sort of tackles you have to make as a winger and decisions, I think he's really good at. Whereas I feel like when you're in the 13 channel, you've got to be a little bit more, and I think he needs more time to develop. To the point of I'd say that maybe do keep chucking him in at 13 for towards the end of the game. So instead of having a centre on the bench, you keep Grady on the wing and you bring him in. similar to what we were trying with Owen Lane at points, and getting to develop, because he does remind me of a young George North, and I think he does have all the attributes to be able to be a wing/centre. But I think also, he also got pulled into Wales a little bit too early because he's so like George North. He was, it seemed like an easy direct replacement in the system. So I'd like to just see him develop and just have plenty of game time. And as Steve, as you mentioned, seeing him with the ball in his hand, and his high ball work is so much better than I thought it was going to be. I know he's got the benefit of being like 17 foot tall. But, it still does take effort. There are plenty of tall people who can't catch high balls. You see, you don't just throw your second, there's a reason you don't drop your second rows into the backfield.
Yeah.
One, because they get lost if they're too far away from their other second row. And two, because they're just, two is because, to get up, because, you've actually got, the springiness to get up. I mean, frankly, chuck him in most lineouts, that will confuse the hell out of teams, because they won't know if he's actually a genuine option or if he's just there as a decoy.
Yeah.
Going on. I think I've had my 2 cents there.
Yeah, I've got a few different things on this. I think if you were looking back historically, people would say he's at the moment probably Cardiff's most potent attacking threat. So therefore, you want to get him his hands on the ball as much as possible. Historically, that would have been saying playing him at centre. The way the game works now, you're bringing your wingers in from here, there, and everywhere. He is so useful off the ruck in that the way Josh Adams can do it sometimes, as we mentioned on previous pods. That's why I'd be tempted to let him have a few games on the wing. The one thing against that, and I'm so glad to see Lilo back, and I don't mean this in any way disparagingly, but eventually Lilo is going to move on. I know no one wants to see it happen. Eventually it's going to happen. Then who's the 13? And I've said that before. And I think that could well be Grady. If it is going to be, he needs to get that game time and opportunity to learn to defend successfully in that position. Because I do think centre might be his best position in the future. And at the moment, maybe wing, you see more of, he's not being caught out defensively as much. But the only way he's going to develop as a centre is if he learns, and he's only going to learn by playing. So that would be my counter to it. I get what Steve's saying with and yourself, Harley, by being so good under the high ball. If you're good under the high ball, you're good at breaking tackles, you're brilliant 101. That pretty much fits, and you're brilliant at 101 tackles. You pretty much fit the bill as a winger. But I don't know. I feel there's a space there at 13 that he more than fills, and will do so very successfully in the future, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think
it's a sort of half sitting on the fence thing there. To be fair, for me,
I feel like I think we're all like, I think as long as he's on, I think for me, I think he's just got to be on the pitch, and then I think you work out where from then. I mean, one thing I've noticed that Cardiff have done for a while, because they have the wingers coming in midfield and picking up the rucks, is the 13 does spend a lot of time on the wing anyway.
Yeah.
So I said, for me, it's not necessarily an attack thing. It's almost more the defence, where I think, is it a case of, do you want to give him a bit of time here and there until he gradually builds up the confidence, then move him in full time, whilst we still have Lilo and Willis to fill the 13 jersey. So couple ones just gonna go through from Liam. Well, he's on Twitter as everything Cardiff rugby and football, but I know it's you, Liam. So his first one, which we can either go over depending on how nice Phil is. Do we think we've ended up with a better deal getting Rhys Litterick over Dylan Lewis? And then which I feel leads into the second part question, which is, for so far this season, who do you think has been our standout forward and standout back? So as you're the guest, Steve, I'll let you take whichever bits you want.
Do I think we've had the better deal by getting Litterick over Dylan Lewis? My first reaction is yes. Because, I mean, I don't want to disparage Dylan Lewis. but it comes back to what I was saying earlier about having players with a bit of a point to prove and a chip on their shoulder. And with Reece Litterick, you've got a player who I think was playing quite far down the divisions in England until quite recently. I mean, he was with Worthing, wasn't he? I mean, it's a couple of divisions below even the Championship, and he seems to have got into Harlequins after playing a couple of A games for them, and was actually released by Harlequins fairly quickly. And so, from his point of view, this is probably potentially his last chance at grabbing professional rugby by the horns, and that is what he's doing. He's been a real find. Been very, very impressed by Reece Litterick. Dylan Lewis, of course, on the other hand, is an international player. But I think when you take into account that international players aren't there every week, and Reece Litterick is really giving it the beans at the moment, yeah, I think we've got the better part of the deal.
I'm going to answer through omission, I think. I think Litterick has performed extremely well at the start of the season. Yeah. And there's a lot that Dylan Lewis can do that Litterick can't. You know, his work around the field, turnovers, etc. That's not something I'm expecting from Reece Litterick. But so far in the scrum, I think he's held his own. I think he's been very strong, and he's, I joked earlier about scoring an 80-yard try, but I think it was something like his first try. He said to Jock, his first try since under 11s rugby or something ridiculous like that. That's what a time to get it for me. Yeah.
Instant hero.
I think that makes you. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I'm taking that down as folklore. To be honest, that's what a time to score it at home to the Stormers when you're 6 games into your career as a Cardiff player. So fair play to him. I think he's hit the ground running and really impressed since coming down.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys say. Expanding on the whole thing of Dylan Lewis being international, not playing a lot, he's also going to have cost a lot more than Litterick probably would have. And having the chip on the shoulder, I mean, he was he stepped behind Simon Kerridge and Wilco Lowe, and they were 2 of the best scrummaging tight heads in the Premiership. And we saw what Wilco Lowe did for 80 minutes against us last season. And one of the Scarlets supporters, I know he was like, well, but talking about who was to blame between Kemsley Mathias and Reece Litterick when Mathias got basically pinged off the park. And he was, he's third choice at Harlequins. I went, yeah, and then you watch Wilco Lowe and you're like, that's why he was third choice, because Wilco Lowe is unbelievably good. And, proving that, he is good enough for this standard. He's a bit cheaper. We're probably saying this, Gatlin will probably call him up, because that's the way things seem to happen in the Welsh clubs. Is you unearth an absolute gem and they get rushed into the national side. But in theory, he's better business, regardless of what you think of both players, because he's cheaper and he's going to be there for. So you're getting a lot more bang for your buck.
Yeah,
and he has put in some very big performances before. I don't want to neg on Dylan Lewis, but I mean Litterick is playing very, very well. We thought he might be third choice tight head coming in. After Azarati and what's his name? The one that
Kieran Parker.
Yeah, and he's making an argument. For me, he's making a very strong argument to be in the conversation for our first choice. Really, I know we've got Azarati to come back, but
I wouldn't pick him over Azarati. But if when we play Harlequins to lose, these big games we got around the corner, and Reece Litterick is starting at tight head, I've got no problem with that after what I've seen in the first few games of this season, and I think that's a big compliment.
Yeah, completely agree.
If we move on to the second bit. So obviously, I think all 3 of us are unanimously impressed with Litterick. But who do you think has been our best forward and back so far?
There are a few contenders, but it's difficult to look past Cameron Winnett and Alex Mann as the most the standout new new back and forward that have come in. Winnett looks better every week. He looks so assured. You wonder what are they putting in the water in his house. I mean, he doesn't have the right to look so calm and composed and professional at his age, and also with his size. He's not a big player, and he's playing in the position where he's having to run into or be run into by much bigger people. He's not overawed at all. Alex Mann, Aberdare solidarity. He's a machine. He's knocking people back. He's winning turnovers. It's huge work rate. And again, going back to what you were saying about players being called up by Wales, they are both strong contenders to be called up by Warren Gatland sooner rather than later. I think Alex Mann is the image of a Warren Gatland back row forward. And Cameron Winnett, I mean, there's some debate over who's going to play fullback for Wales. I think he's pushing his way to the front of the queue very quickly.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, both in your description of both players. To be honest, Cam to me, I didn't think he was that sort of player. I didn't think he was that assured, calming presence that he has been. I thought he was more Johnny McNichol-esque, try things for him everywhere. Partly because the majority of what I'd seen from him had been the Toulouse and Harlequins game from a couple of years ago, where he was trying things from everywhere because that was how Cardiff were forced to play with 15 different players. So he's an exciting prospect. It's a case of whether he can force his way into Gatland's plans, because I don't think Gatland would have been looking at all at him this time last year, this time 6 weeks ago, really. But now he's shown himself to be one of the form fullbacks. Well, probably the second form fullback in Welsh rugby at the moment, behind Max Nagy, who unfortunately isn't Welsh qualified, because I watched him on the weekend. He was superb. But Cam is playing brilliantly week in, week out and deserves his kudos. And you've nailed it with Alex Mann. If ever there was a player that exemplified what Gatland will want in a six, he's big, physical, will work his socks off. And he's done that. He was doing that for under 20s. There was a reason he was captain, was because he worked so hard. That was a tough under 20s campaign that he was involved in when he was captain. It was really tough. And they were getting pinged here, there, and everywhere, getting yellow carded. I remember him getting yellow carded, and Wales really struggling while he was off the park. I think he actually might have got red carded in a game. I can't remember. He definitely did a high tackle, but he works so hard for his side, whether that be Cardiff, whether that be Wales in 20s, and I already see a rapid increase and rapid improvement in him, both as a leader and as a just general player. Because, that he made a mistake a couple of weeks ago against Scarlets. I mentioned it on the pod. I mentioned it again here because of how much he's improved since then. There weren't any mistakes on the weekend. It was defensively, he seems solid. Defensively, he's now becoming almost a linchpin, and he's also a line-out option. I can't see where... I haven't seen a fault in his game yet. Maybe, there was one loose pass perhaps on the weekend that would have been nice if it had gone to hand, but those are the extras. And Warren Gatland won't be looking for that. He'll be looking for, what does he do? Does he work hard? Yes. Does he provide a line-out option? Yes. Does he want to, defend for his life and embody that Sean Edwards esque mantra? Yes. So big fan of him, and long may it continue in Cardiff shirt and hopefully in the Wales shirt in the future.
And I think it's going to be quite difficult for other players to dislodge him from that Cardiff shirt already. I think Shane... I mean, we got some good sixes. I mean, Shane Lewis-Hughes, Josh Turnbull, of course. I think that 6 jersey is Alex Mann's for the duration, and it's going to be very difficult for someone to take it off him.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely agree with all that. And I said, I mean, it may not be as much of a problem position for Wales as like tight head and 10, but it is one Gatland's been struggling to work out what he does when it's not Aaron Wainwright and Faletau at 8. And with Aaron, it looks like Aaron Wainwright's probably going to end up playing a lot more at 8 for Wales. in the future because of Slube, probably going to call it at some point. We don't know when, but also I don't know whether or not he is going to be fit enough for the Six Nations, or whether Gatland even thinks, is it worth just leaving him out for a campaign, see what we got? Having a six who is abrasive, is a line-out option, is not going to let you down. Somebody's, spotting, opportunities for counter-rucks, showing some game smarts as well. That is going to be very key. I think other forward, I'd like to say, I think Teddy Williams has come back from that training camp and looks like the hard, abrasive second row we've needed, I think, for quite a while. So I quite like him. Tamani's been brilliant. He looks the real deal, yeah. I thought Big Mac, I thought he was absolutely fantastic for the half hour or so he had off the bench. I said we already talked about that pick off the base, and maybe a bit of footwork or a slightly weaker defender, and he's over for the try there. But just that was the explosive pace off that base was just such a great sight to see. Backs wise, again, we've mentioned him, Ellis Bevan. I think has been brilliant. I think he's taken this opportunity really well. Grady, excellent. I thought Harry Millard's been really good as well. I unfortunately kicked him off early. I think we're all agreed it's Alex Manning can win it, but
yeah,
it's been such a good team.
The other player I want to mention, only because he's done much better than I thought he was going to, is Evan Lloyd. Because when I think he was on the team sheet for the Bulls game first, and I thought, I'm a bit worried about that, because he's 21 years old. I don't think he's actually played that much senior rugby. And until last season, he was a number 8. And a player that inexperienced coming into play hooker against a big South African pack. I was a bit worried about that. The games he's played, both against big South African packs, he's been excellent. A couple of errors, but he's winning turnovers. He's making an impact ball in hand. There's another really good player starting to emerge there, I think. Maybe not quite yet. I mean, you probably wouldn't start him quite yet, but that's another really promising player we got on the books. So yeah, it's all good news this week, isn't it?
Yeah. Speaking of hookers playing well, I think Evan Daniel's been pretty decent as well. I mean, again, I had a couple of errors at the line out, but I mean, can you be a hooker for Cardiff and not have a few errors every game?
No, it's written in the contract, isn't it?
Yeah. That's it. I mean, going back to Evan Lloyd's though, that game against the Bulls, his first line out, you could tell was a little bit of nerves.
Yeah,
Spook went not wonky, but then his arrows were great after that. So yeah, he's it's definitely something I have noticed for the most part. And I'm gonna touch everything wood in this room now. For the most part, I think the lineout's gone a lot better than it has in the past few seasons.
Jesus, don't speak too soon.
Yeah, great. So I apologise in advance, everyone, for us somehow managing to get 0 lineup success against Scarlets.
It was wrong on the weekend, yeah.
I was just Steve there put the nail on the head, really, didn't he, when he said this is a lot more positive this week. I think someone's commented under one of your posts, Steve, saying they're slightly disappointed you're on this week when we don't need an excuse to be positive.
Yeah, I think that was Big Tony, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think from my perspective, certainly last week and the week before, it was frustration. We've seen this Cardiff side grow and how it's improving, how it's getting better week in, week out, but just not getting over the line. I think that was the frustration rather than any maybe the negativity. I hold my hands up to that. I am probably captain negative, captain leader, legend of the negative team, if there ever is one. But it's frustration more than anything else. And I think on the weekend Cardiff showed exactly what they can provide, which is a team that can stick in there, have moments of absolute brilliance, 2 brilliant tries, but can do the dirty work, get over the line. And if I'm honest, I think that's likely to become more the case when one player we haven't mentioned, Jim Botham, comes back. That's well. That players like him, players like Josh Adams, who I'm sure we're going to talk about in a bit, players players like Owen Lane, those players who finish opportunities every chance they get and create opportunities for others out of nowhere. So I'm excited for the future.
That's the point. Like, where do you put both of them? You've got so many people playing well. Like, I mean,
I was just talking about players we got in place 6. And I completely forgot Jim Botham.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's true. Where do you put him? I mean, I want to say you have to pick him if he's fit, but yeah, it's difficult getting that back row.
Because I wouldn't want to drop Alex Matt. Do you know? I think even with everyone fit, I'm really liking Tamani as an 8. I know we initially got him to be that tight headlock, but I'm quite liking him.
It is quite handy. Like, who do we have to play number 8? Or hang on, we got a guy who used to play for the Wallabies at number 8. It's just it's a happy accident, isn't it? But he was excellent against Zebra. He was excellent for the hour or so he was on the field against Stormers. Very difficult to drop.
Yeah, I'm loving it, and we've got my captain Josh Turnbull. He's back fit now. I can see him fighting for a second row berth at the moment.
Yeah,
I think it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, and talking about optimism and being excited and being upbeat, I genuinely think this is a season that in a couple of years' time we'll look back on and think that was the start of something. Because when you look at this squad, the age profile of it, if we can keep this group together, and it's an if, because we all know the recent history of Welsh rugby, but we keep that group together, maybe add a couple of more players from outside here and there, keep bringing players through from the terrific schools we got in the area and universities. A couple of years' time, we could be a really serious team. Not just like the plucky underdog thing we're still kind of doing at the moment. We could be really pushing for honours. And so this is a big season, and it's a really exciting one. And I'm loving it at the moment.
Yeah. So I think let's carry on this wave of optimism. So we've got.
Yeah. And if anyone listening to this or watching this is in two minds about whether you should be coming down to the Arms Park this season and thinking, maybe they're done, get rid of that thought and come down, because it's a really good place to be at the moment.
Yeah, I said, unfortunately, I think that was our last Friday night game at Cat at home, which is annoying because I finally in a position where I can start going to Friday night games again. But it's still one of my favourite atmospheres. But I'm hopefully making up with plenty more games as I soon relocating to Cardiff again. So I said, keeping the wave of optimism. For those on YouTube, you'll see I've got 2 jerseys behind me, both provided kindly by Will Boyd. So we're going to be facing his old team, Scarlets. They did not have a good game against Ospreys. Are we thinking there's going to be a backlash, or do we think that we've hit a point now where it's going to be? I predict on the wrap that we're going to beat them by at least 10, because I feel like we've gotten a, which again is just asking for us to get it wrong. But I felt when we played them at Parker Scarlets, the biggest issue for us, our attack wasn't functioning, and now it looks like the attack seems to be clicking, and their defense somehow seems to be getting worse every game.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't see the Scarlets Ospreys game. I was a bit surprised by the scoreline. I know they got problems there, but I was still a bit surprised by the scoreline. I think this is possibly going to be one of those games where if we get a lead early, Scarlets' heads might drop a little bit, and then we could really impose ourselves. But if that doesn't happen and they find a way in, they'll have a good travelling support. I mean, I say travelling support, most of them will have travelled down from Pontcanna, but they'll have a lot of people on the North Terrace. If that contingent gets behind them, if they get a little bit of an edge early on, it's going to be quite a sticky game. So it's going to come down a lot to how we start the match. But we're definitely favourites for this one, and for good reason. But I think it's going to be another tight one. I'll be surprised if it's not another one-score game.
The way Scarlets played last week, no. I think Cardiff could win by a country mile, and I don't mean to put the knockers on it, but I was there yesterday, and supporting the Ospreys partly because I was with my partner's family who are all Scarlets fans and just wanted to be the black sheep even
That's
more than I already am. But at the moment, there were two major issues Scarlets had in that game, which were their front row couldn't compete against a strong Ospreys front row. You know, Nicky Smith, we all know how strong he is as a scrummager on both of the other side. And their back row is still inexperienced. And it was up against Rhys Davis, Jack Morgan, Morgan Morse, who was all superb. And that's where the game got dominated, really. The other problem they've got is they've got a 10 and a 15 who, if they've got go forward ball, are in the game, and it's loose, it's open, and it's free running, they are huge threats. But if it's wet, as it was on yesterday, if they're behind chasing the game, they struggle. And that second half performance from Scarlets was, I would say, worrying if you're a Scarlets fan. And I don't say it lightly, you know, the lack of, you know, we've mentioned leadership, the lack of someone saying, right, let's tighten things up a bit. Let's just get a bit of territory. You know, they got a 50-22 with Joe Roberts' kick. But apart from that, they didn't really get much territory that second half. They had a couple of scrums penalties. They just did a scrum penalty to a scrum penalty to nothing. And it was a very frustrating game to watch if you're a Scarlets fan. There were lots of players who, you know, there's a last play of the game where the forwards just weren't working hard enough. And I appreciate by that point they're 31-9 down. But I do think this is a side that are at the moment really struggling for confidence. And Cardiff are coming from the complete opposite, bouncing off the back of a win. I struggle to see how Cardiff don't win the game, because at the moment, the back row seems a more cohesive unit that Cardiff have got. The front row seems a more cohesive unit at the moment as well. So if you've got those two areas, I struggle to see where Scarlets can hurt you, but I don't think they've got it in them at the moment to beat Cardiff on Saturday. And yeah, that's a long and short of it. I'd agree with. I'd probably stretch out to 15 points. Cardiff win. That if I was to really put the knockers on it and really sort of rub it in what I think that prediction is going to be, because that Scarlet second half performance was a bit worrying, I must say, from a Scarlet perspective. Sorry, I should say.
We owe them one, so you know we owe the Scarlets a bit of a beating, but I'm not going to predict that because I have too much respect for the Mockers gods. But games against the Scarlets can be a bit weird and can creep up on you and be a bit unexpected. So I'm going to stick with it being a one-score game, but I think we will win it.
Yeah, that's it. I think the big thing for me is, again, we point out all the different set of battles. Our kicking game was far better than theirs when we were at Park Scarlets. It hasn't, our kicking game is only going to improve if we keep Ben Thomas at 12, having that extra option. Our scrum was better, I think. And, Wyn Jones isn't looking great at the moment. Kenzie Mathias, apparently he's been injured, and that's why he was having some issues. Steph Thomas and it was the other O'Connor. And you got Harry O'Connor on the tight side. You got Harry on the tight, and then there's another O'Connor as well.
Oh yeah, sorry.
It might be the brother. It might be a brother or cousin or something. He's like a bit lower down the pecking order on the loose head side. It's. I can see we doing better than there. I think our second rows are most. I think we could probably pick any two of our second rows. I think they'd beat if Lousey's still injured, because I think he is still off. I think if you got Lousey and Fafita there, I think the thing that seemed to cost us in games like that were players like Lousey, Fafita, Gareth Davis, Callum Mahoney, these guys coming up and stepping it big and using moments of brisness, again, in these tight, sticky games. So as I said, I think a big issue for us last time out was the attack was really, really clunky. Now it's smoothing out. I imagine it's probably, well, you'd hope it's going to be better again. I mean, I'm very optimistic, which worries me a lot. Because usually that's when Cardiff do a Cardiff and bite me in the arse. But
yeah, there's further reason for us to be negative in future now. You're setting it up for us, Harley.
Yeah.
If we
The only
lose now,
reason
is
to be
that
negative is supernatural. Yeah.
is this an excuse for us to now? If we lose, is now we've just got to be negative every game and hope for the best? Because then,
because I'd rather Cardiff prove me wrong by being when I'm being negative and then being awesome than me expecting them to be awesome and prove me wrong by. But yeah, I'm speaking. Should we move on to sort of a rough idea of our team? For me, unless he wants to carry on with his switching in the front rows, I think I'm guessing Belcher's going to start as captain again, as if he's fit. Whether you bring Carey in, and it seems to be working quite well. The loose heads rotating around. I think Kieran Parker's back from his ban now. I think this is his first game back. I don't know if he comes in or if you keep Will Davis King. Again, move him to batch, start Litterick. Any thoughts front row wise? I think there's not really a huge amount of selection.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say with Parker, isn't it? Because we've only seen. I mean, he looked pretty good in pre-season, but we've only seen that sort of 20 minutes against Benetton where he looked keen, but unfortunately a bit too keen. Sherrod will have a better idea from seeing him in training whether he's ready to come straight back in. In a perfect world, we'd have Azarati, but apparently he's still injured, I think.
I think it's another week
tricky.
or two for him.
I think Litterick starts, but I'm not sure about the bench.
I would agree that in the Scarlets were missing Sam Wainwright on the weekend, obviously through tragic circumstances with his father passing. But I think that's an area to get at. Scarlets at the moment is their front row, so I'd like to see Litterick start. I think it'd be too much to put on Parker to start, having obviously been out for so long after such a momentous, is that the right word? Possibly not, but ending to his first game. But I'd start Litterick, and I'd probably go with Parker on the bench if he's up to it. And I mean that obviously it's going to be a difficult one for him, having spent so much time on the sidelines. So hopefully he's back rearing to go.
Yeah,
and then I was going to just lead into second rows, which I we seem to say every week, same again, and then it never is. So I don't know. I don't know what you think this week, Harley. Would you like to see Turnbull start?
He's club captain and stuff, so you feel like he should be starting. But then it's like, do you move to do you drop him for Thornton, for Seb? If Teddy's fit again, does he come back in as well? I said the second. It's a weird situation for Cardiff, having a lot of discussion in the second row, and it's not about which flanker you move in, which is quite nice for us. I like it's Derby. If fit, I quite like to see Teddy in there. Maybe have Turnbull inside or Seb. I mean that was seeming to work quite well for a couple of games.
I think if Teddy's fit, he starts.
Yeah, agreed.
And I would say with Turnbull and let Seb be an impact replacement. In the back of my mind, I think maybe Thornton should stay because he's a strong line-out forward, and that's something we want to make sure is clicking. But assuming Teddy's fit, I would probably go with Teddy and Turnbull in the engine room there. We're probably losing a little bit of size maybe by having Turnbull in there, but against the Scarlets, who we're saying they have a relatively underpowered pack, we could probably get away with it. So yeah, I'd say Teddy and Turnbull for me.
I'm gonna say Teddy and Seb or Teddy and Thornton just to have Turnbull on the bench for that experience. I really like that closing it out experience off the bench. That sounds really unfair then to have your club captain brought on for the final 10 or for final 20 just for experience. But at the moment when he's still getting his way back to match fitness, I'd rather have him on the end of the game than lose him after 50 and end up in a similar situation as we have in the first couple of weeks. But no, it's
nice to have choices, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then speaking of selection headaches, we've got the back row. I mean, I don't know how much of a headache it is, because this is one where I feel like it's same again all the way. Like I'm really liking the balance of Tamani, Alex Mann, and Ellis Jenkins.
Yeah, it's same again, isn't it? Yeah. I mean,
I'm not sure what the situation is with Thomas Young. I know he was out with it. He was mentioned as having a minor injury, but
I think that back row worked so well the last game. It's difficult to drop anyone. Thomas Young, again, a great guy to have coming off the bench. We need to change the game, or hopefully, if we want to really put the Turks to the sword in the second half. But yeah, I think same again.
I think the only other option is, I mean, I don't want to be throwing Big Mac in every game. He's still quite a young lad by all accounts, so you don't want to be ruining his body too much. But I mean, maybe if you want to have that impact, you're having Tamani carrying at them solidly for 50, 55, 57
I suppose
minutes again.
One issue with Tamani might be, can he actually play every week, because he seems to be carrying a lot of injuries, and he's put in some massive shifts the last couple of weeks.
So I mean, that might be an option, a route to bring in Turnbull in and bring him in
play,
yeah. But yeah, I said back five for Cardiff. Always fun selections for various reasons. Halfbacks, I think if Thomas is fit, he's straight back in. Or do we trust Bevan again?
How controversial can we go?
Let's start Jamie Hill.
I'd be tempted to start Bevan.
And I realised that might be actually.
Yeah, I feel like that last game against the Stormers, it showed he earned it, and actually maybe again with that impact off Thomas with that impact off the bench and theory leadership. Again, I think he was another one who's listed as having a niggle last week. Actually, do we want to rest him? Do we want to save Thomas for the actual big games? Not these little Mickey Mouse against the bottom of the table. Bottom of the URC teams.
I think
that'll age like milk.
I think it's not so much a case of resting Thomas as Ellis Bevan started looking the real deal last week. So maybe just leave him there and see how he goes, see how he keeps developing. And then you've got, assuming Thomas is fit, you've got an exceptional player to bring off the bench, maybe even an outside half. So.
Yeah,
and also you've got a player who, I think if ever there was a player who won't take dropping well in the best of ways, I mean, as in he'll go, I've been dropped here. Why have I been dropped here? I want to prove a point. If there's ever been a player, I think Thomas will prove that point. I think that's why I'd like to. It's another reason to stick with Bevan. I think Thomas needs competition. I think it'd be good for Thomas to have competition, and I think Bevan has earned his right, as Steve says. It was such a successful performance last week. Why change? And he's not. We can skip 10 because Sherritt's not going to change that. So let's move to 12.
It's going to be De Vere. Yeah. I think the only thing is what the bench option is going to be, or if we carry on the same way we have been, where we've had back, people in the sort of back three or centres.
Would you start Gabriel Hamer-Webb this week?
I was about to say, I was going to leave wingers till a bit later, but you know what? Let's go, because I think back three is going to be actually quite an interesting one with the news that Josh Adams might be it again. Because I think back three could be quite a tasty one as well. Because actually, to be honest, everything from 12 to I'd say 12 to 14, because I feel like for me 15 it's Cam win it again.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a fairly assured one. As much so I like Beetham every time he's been on. I think Cam Winnett is just making himself undroppable at the moment, or as near as you can be.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
So, what do you think, wings? If Adams is fit,
I think first and foremost, from a player safety point of view, I hope I kind of there's part of me that hopes Harry Miller doesn't feature this weekend, because that was one hell of a knock, and I just think it's probably best he does have a week off, and it has come at a in all for Cardiff as a whole a better time when Hamer Webb's come through and played well and Josh Adams back. Hamer Webb, based on absolutely nothing, and I think Josh Adams is one of the best wings in the world, but I really enjoyed his performance. Josh easing back in.
You think, thinking of Adams on the bench then maybe, and then having Grady on the other one?
Yeah, but that means dropping probably a Beetham from your 23, doesn't it? So that's what's difficult about it, because Beetham deserves to be part of the 23 as well. But yeah, I think that maybe Josh is your 23, but I don't know. Steve, what do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I that's what I do. I'd have Hamer Webb, Grady as starting wings, and Adams on the bench. Adams, of course, can cover centre as well.
Don't swear on this podcast. I mean, you can swear on this podcast, but that is swearing on this podcast.
I was about to add a pinch.
Oh, he can cover say he's wing and fullback, and then it covers all things, and we'll just have Beetham get Beetham to play cover 12. That's right. I think centres. I'm really liking Ben Thomas at 12. I'd like to see. I think giving him a bit more time. I don't know if we want to bring the dream team of Halaholo and Lilo out, or have one start, one on the bench again, or
I think
with Grady covering 13. I mean, you don't necessarily need them both.
That's true. Yeah. I think it's Ben Thomas 12, and then it comes down to whether you pick Halaholo or his mate at 13, and I think that's a time cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of me feels like I'd like Lilo because he is the better defensive player and the more natural 13. As great as Halaholo's been, I do feel like, because we are probably, we're looking at probably a Johnny Williams, or, Johnny Williams, which should be, I feel like, is an easy one to contain, because he's just a slightly bigger, less effective Kieran Williams, as we proved on the weekend. I'm saying that purely because I know it's going to wind up a couple of my Scarlets friends, and very controversial. But
I should add, my face was more saying that was a bit harsh on Kieran Williams, is it not? But maybe I'm pushing it too far there.
But it's one of those. Yeah, I think you do want someone. But for me, I think Joe Roberts shows he's quite an adept 13. I think his kicking game, I think his rugby IQ is quite up there. So actually having a 13 who's is a lot more solid. Not that Halaholo would let us down.
Well, I'm also thinking, if on the bench we've got Thomas Williams, Halaholo, and Josh Adams, that's some quite nice firepower to bring off the bench. Yeah.
I think Scarlets would be shitting themselves with that thought.
Yeah,
that is chaos incarnate. No matter which way round, no matter who you're subbing for who.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I definitely start Lilo at 13. My only temptation would be maybe Halaholo at 12, just purely for his size. But I think Ben's showing...
And then Ben Thomas to bench, I guess, for that one.
Yeah, but I think Ben's... I was just going to say, I just think Ben's shown what he can do defensively and in attack, that he is big enough and runs clever enough lines and can tackle well enough to play 12 against, Johnny Williams is a big unit. Sometimes, when he gets it right, he can get it very right. But... So yeah, Joe Roberts is a really good player. So I'd like to see a proper 13 going up against him, I think, this week.
Yeah, I think it's fairly settled. So watch us be pretty unsurprisingly wrong, despite the very limited choices. Any other thoughts for Saturday, other than get yourselves down to Cap? Tickets are selling fast. Particularly if you want to be in the best terrace, the South Terrace.
Exactly.
I was just about to say there's one more question, which was from Cardiff Blues UAE, which we didn't
sorry, I did
jump on that.
Apologies, yeah.
I just thought we'd answer it before we go, because it says 6 games in, what do we think are realistic goals? Top 10 maybe, best Welsh region, although the O's are looking solid. top 10 would be nice. I think it's definitely achievable. Just about, because the second half of the season is going to be tough, as we've mentioned several times. But best Welsh region is the other one that okay, it doesn't give you Europe this year, top level Europe this year, but it still is a nice little badge of honour to have. And I don't think, well, Dragons haven't been as improved as I thought they'd be this season. Scarlets seem to have taken a slight step backwards so far, or definitely struggling for confidence. Ospreys have won some games, close games, and won them well, but have a really horrible end to the season. So I think there's an opportunity there. So that's the one that I'd like to see if Cardiff can remain as best Welsh region, because that's something I wouldn't have predicted before the season. That would be, I think that would be a successful season. I don't know about either of you, Steve. What do you think?
In terms of targets, I'm not sure about league position, but I think in terms of achievable targets, I think knocking one or two teams over in Europe is a plausible target, because we're kind of going in as the sort of ugly stepchild of the Champions Cup. No one thinks we're going to do anything, but I think we're a better team than people reckon. And I think, Harlequins coming to Cardiff, Bath coming to Cardiff. I would love to knock one or both of those teams over, and I think it's doable. And I think results like that would give the whole club a further shot in the arm. So rather than thinking too much about league placings, I think doing something in Europe in terms of pulling a couple of teams' pants down, that's the achievable target that I'm looking at, I think. As for URC, it's difficult because I haven't really looked at how the fixtures have falling for all the other teams, but there's not much between us and the top 10. And I think based on the first few weekends of URC, it's actually a pretty even tournament, I think. We certainly haven't been overawed by anyone yet. So yeah, but yeah, in terms of achievable goals, doing something in Europe, let's shock a couple of people.
So at the start of the season, I predicted that I think a good season for Cardiff would have been Welsh Shield, retain the Welsh Shield and maybe squeak into the playoffs. I think it's going to be hard. It's particularly with our running, but I think it's certainly possible. Again, I'd like to see. So Europe last couple of seasons, you only needed one win and maybe pick up a couple of losing bonus points here and there to get into the last 16, and then it's knockout rugby, and you never know what happened in knockout rugby.
Yeah.
Even then, if we miss that, as long as we don't finish dead last, then we go into the Challenge Cup. And let's be fair, there's no Welsh side better at doing the Challenge Cup than Cardiff. And that could be a route into Europe next year. Actually, something we briefly touched on the wrap was that is that maybe a better target for Welsh sides if we've got an aspiration to play Champions Cup rugby next season. Maybe not necessarily the best thing for us, but you are then playing the bigger teams and you're going to draw crowds. It's actually maybe willing that it might actually be easier to win the Challenge Cup than it is to make top 8 in the URC because it's so competitive. Although again, we're round 6 now. There's not a single unbeaten team. There's not a single team who hasn't got a win, which I think is the first time in the Celtic League, as it's various guises, I think's happened. I saw someone be able to quickly fact check me on that one, but I'm pretty sure there's usually always been like one unbeaten team and one team who's not managed to get a win from anything. So actually, it seems quite competitive this season.
Just a reminder, Harley, where can they at you if if someone does find that out to be incorrect?
I'm at Worthy Harley because Twitter swapped me first and surnames around. That's not me actually trying to be particularly too big on X. I've also very recently joined Blue Sky at Harley W. So you can have a go at me on nice Twitter as well if you really fancy it.
Yeah, or you could just directly go to the pod, which is, of course, at Cardiff_Central on Twitter. If you want to at us about that. But yeah, I'm not sure if that is true, but it has seemed to be bit of mid-table fighting this season, which is good to see, with the perennial issue of travelling out to South Africa being a bit of a problem for everyone. So we'll see how that goes.
I feel like we sort of briefly gone into, I think, unless anyone's got anything burning they want to say. Steve, where can we find you on the socials if you wish to be found?
I'm not convinced I'm going to stay on Twitter because I'm finding it so annoying. But on socials, I'm at S_Coombsy COOMBSY. Bleddyn has its own Twitter account or X account, which you can find at Bleddyn_1953. And there's the website, Bleddyn1953.co.uk.
Excellent, Karen. Do you want your socials out for the world, or just hope and maybe see if people find you there?
It is 100% not worth it. But yeah, I've already made a note of that, and I'm going to try and slip the website address of Bleddyn to my partner downstairs somehow in a very unsubtle Christmas gift, please. So that's the
check out this cool thing.
Yeah, check out this cool comic that I'm really excited about. Please. Yeah, thanks so much, Steve, for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk more about your project and the projects to come. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's been fun, guys. I've really enjoyed it.
I'm sure we'll find reasons to have you on any other time.
Buy my comic book, please. Buy several. Buy them for your friends, your partners, and your children or grandchildren.
I think that's all for tonight. I am absolutely knackered after 3.75 hours of podcasting. So I just want to say thank you to Carwyn again. Thank you to Steve once again for bringing on this lovely project. Please feel free to. So if you listen to this, you're already aware that we're on Spotify, Apple, and anywhere you get your podcast. But also, please do check out our YouTube channel and our sister podcasts. It's part of the Rap family. And again, remember, South Terrace is the best terrace.
It is.
Good night.
Good night.
What's that?
Thank you for listening to the Cardiff Central podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe, rate and review wherever you listen to us, as it really helps spread the word. You can find us on all the usual social media channels or email us on welshregionalrugbypod@gmail.com. And remember, whatever the question is, rugby is always the answer.
Sports Social Podcast Network.